Today at Embr, its hosts Robb, Vallozzi, and Jason Dominique and their guests are not financial advisors unless otherwise disclaimed. The content on Today at Embr is for educational and entertainment purposes only and merely cite their own personal opinions. Know that all investments involve some form of risk. Please work with an investment professional. And now, on to the show.
Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to episode, and I can't believe it, episode 22 of Today at Embr. We have a fantastic show for you. It's been an exciting week for Embr this week. I have a variety of discussions to get into. My name is Robb Vallozzi. I am your co-host, along with our co-CEO and my co-host, Jason Dominique. Jason, how you doing today, buddy?
Hey, Rob. Good to be here as always. Feels like it's been forever that we had, this discussion, just you and I. Because with the guests, it's a bit different. We don't get the same dynamics, just you and I. So looking forward to this chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Last week, unfortunately, we had to have a little bit of delay. I wasn't feeling well, but now I'm back in the saddle, and I cannot be happier to be back here in this seat talking to you, Jason. We have a great show for you guys today. We're going to go over a wide variety of stuff. We're going to go ahead and give you guys a little bit of a project update later. We're going to be taking some frequently asked questions or live questions from our community. We're doing that in a bit. But first, we are going to have a broader discussion at some topics that have been really driving me and Jason and our thought process, having some thought experiments behind the scenes, some things that are going on in the crypto world. And one of the big things, Jason, I'd like to know your thoughts on this, is apparently cryptocurrency is going to be in the blockchain in everything, including some of the most so quote unquote stable investments that you could possibly have, and that's real estate. Jason, want to know what your top end thoughts are? We'll get a little bit deeper into the particulars. We'll start off with some of the ones that I think are a good move, and some of the more speculative stuff a bit later. But I want to know your pie in the sky thoughts.
Well, I mean, I've actually mentioned this a few times in the past about how I think the deeds to your property could potentially end up being some sort of NFT and things like that. I don't know if that's where you wanted to head into. I know that recently in the news, they've been talking about accepting crypto for, paying lease and things like that. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't see why it shouldn't be a form of acceptable payment. It's worth something. There's liquidity behind it. And any landlord or someone that would want to accept it is completely his own right to decide to accept that type of tender, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree. I think on that end of the spectrum when it comes to real estate, being here in Miami, it's basically our only economic growth is totally based around real estate development, especially a speculative real estate market. When I was in at the conference Bitcoin 2022, there was quite a few big developments that were trying to reach an audience that are in the crypto audience. I'm not sure if they're accepting payments or not, but I do think something like Jamestown Partners accepting, using something like Bitmart to accept payment, that I think is something that's right up also, up our alley. What we're looking at when it comes to utility, when it comes to payment, when it comes to processing, I think there's something actually there. I think that's something that should be, just like you're able to buy a glass of milk or use anything else. I think that shouldn't be a problem moving forward.
Yeah, and I think it builds sort of a connection or a bridge, and this is where I feel there's a correlation between. A few years back when you started seeing this emergence of Venmo and things like that. So it's really about, at the end of the day, how can you move money to one party to another without necessarily going through like intermediaries in the middle. And I think that yeah, exactly. And I think, Venmo is not so much the exact sort of same use case, but it's the same purpose.
The
the
moving of asset, money from one person to another.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Venmo, you need to have it connected either with a credit card or your bank account and things like that. But if you look at a similar approach with blockchain in the DeFi space, I feel this could definitely get a lot of traction if someone, I don't know who, but if someone could release, some form of peer-to-peer, crypto-to-crypto sort of way of transferring funds and digital assets, and the thing is, most of the time with these type um, of systems, hopefully, I mean, right now they want it, they want it to be regulated, but in the unregulated space for DeFi, I think regarding the peer to peer, this has an incredible amount of growth potential, especially in emerging markets. You look at places where banking infrastructure is not as present, or even where people just are maybe a bit more forward looking in terms of adopting new technologies. So yeah.
No, I totally agree. I think that you bring up the idea of emerging markets. When we spoke a couple of weeks back, when we were talking with Jamal from Wire, where there was a big focus on the idea that there is not this, banking infrastructure. Most people, a large portion of them don't even have a bank account. But I wonder though if this is, and we'll talk about this a little bit more ad nauseum once we get into the idea of some of the more speculative parts of this real estate endeavor. That one of the biggest announcements was Jamestown Partners partnering with BitPay to be able to take payments. And they have a wide variety of ones. Even Dogecoin, they're apparently taking as well. But Jamestown Partners is based out of the United States only. And I'm wondering if this is a lot of corporate America just jumping on whatever the next big thing is to signal like, hey, we're part of the cool kids. Because really, with stuff like Venmo, with even with Coinbase, now Coinbase has a credit card. I mean, with a minor transaction
There
fee,
was
there's all.
Bitcoin Cash. There was Bitcoin Cash at some point, or
Yeah, Bitcoin Cash also. So these were other ways that they could just do that to convert it to money to be able to pay their tenant. I mean, to pay their landlord, their tenant to be able to pay on their landlord. I'm wondering though, what's your thoughts? I mean, there's Bitmart being involved. Is this just everyone just either saying, hey, we want to signal that we're all for cryptocurrency and regulators should take notice, or is this more of like, hey, we're part of the cool kids. Come over here, and we have your free Wi-Fi and your skateboard to come with it.
well, yeah, I think like the true answer to this is, like any business, when you decide to go in a direction, you need to have sort of strategies and tactics and metrics to follow through. And some of these tactics, in my opinion, with Jamestown, could possibly be just to be in the media. I mean, ultimately, the way I see it is, it's not going to be decentralized, so it's going to be centralized. You'll probably need, like you mentioning, a BitPay account. So that means user adoption for BitPay, and fundamentally, at the end of the day, it's more fees, transaction fees and things like that. And bottom line, will they actually have will that actually convert in new, like, people that use BitPay? And then ultimately, will that end up, being people, are they going to be on ramping, fiat to crypto? And then from there, convert whichever native um, currency that they have into the accepted means of payment. So it's still a lot of friction, in my opinion, compared to what you already have that is set up either through EFT or something like that.
Mhm.
But it's well intended. I think at the end of the day, it's well intended, and the market is going in that direction. But for now, I still think it's a way of, like you're saying, Rob. I think it's a way of positioning yourself, and it's some sort of trait, just like back in the day, when places used to have Wi-Fi versus connected computers on Ethernet. Come over here. We have Wi-Fi, or
Yeah, yeah.
startups that have free food and candy. At the end of the
Mhm.
day, how many people truly eat that candy? It's like it sounds great, but what's the actual adoption and usage and conversion out of
As
that
opposed to
benefit?
it being like a publicity stunt, you know.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, it could be anything, but you're asking for my opinion and my take
No,
on it.
no, absolutely. I think it's a good anything that shows widespread adoption, that shows a use case. I think it goes, and I've used this term before. Rising tide raises all ships. I think it's beneficial for the industry as a whole, because especially when a lot of the market, especially the traditional finance, a lot of them look at it like, well, what do you do with it once you have it? Like once you own it, besides of making, as an investment or whatever, what is the real use behind it? And I mean, for those that are economists out there, what can make the same argument with gold. I'm not going to take a bar of gold and be able to walk into to Publix and
No.
start shaving it off to be able to buy a sandwich. Unless you're some libertarian dream, I guess. That I think that it can make that same case, and I think it's entirely speculative. But the idea that there is a real use case, I think it's great for everybody. Now, moving on to the next part of it, though, is that I'm going to kind of go down the line here, because that's what I see as real utility. As someone who's 40 years old, who's been in the real estate market, who's lived through the Great Recession, as they used to call it, and see markets go up and down, that the that real estate is supposed to be this very this would be non-volatile. There's the idea of this, a very substantial piece of collateral. That's the idea, is real property. That's what real estate is, real. That's what they call it, real property, because everything else is entirely speculative, because it's really air. That their crypto, I don't know if it's what you're, I want to know if you think this as well. Is it a victim of its own success, in the sense that because it's so successful and has so many use cases when it comes to blockchain, NFT? I mean, people here, I see them talking about something like when it comes to loans, as you were talking about too, with proof of stake, NFTs, to be able to remove that idea of paperwork when it comes to the loan and finance world. I think there's a lot of utility there as well. Where it starts to get, I think, a little bit dodgy, though, is like one of the largest real estate developers here in Dubai, Damac Properties. They're adding Bitcoin, Ethereum as a method of payment to be able to purchase these, pre-construction real estate properties that are enormous. But they kind of slide in also too, is that we're also going to be putting in $100 million into the metaverse to sell real estate there as well. And I'm wondering
Oh,
if
that's the Pandora's box.
yeah, I wonder if so I mean, this is the largest. This is no, they had $1 billion profit last year. They're they're all over the Arab states, and also too in the UK, and them trying to blend these two things together. We're starting to enter speculative, tulip markets from the Swiss back in the day. Now we're starting talking about metaverse and tying these two things together.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a huge topic, and it's definitely gained a lot of attention and traction. Both in the media and people investing in it. If you look at beyond the use case, that the example that you're bringing forward, if you look at ApeCoin, where they have, I think it's called the Apeverse or something like that. It's I understand the motivations behind it, of buying land in the metaverse and things like that, and potentially, building your house there and hiring people. And, it's like, it is a bit mind bending to think that this could possibly be a reality in a dystopian future. But I think something that I read recently on this, and I think it was really interesting, is why do all these sort of future portraying movies or series or even books, when they talk about VR and the reason why people sort of go in those, and let's say hypothetically would have bought a land and bought a house to basically hang
Live in
on
the
their
metaverse.
walls, yeah, hang on their walls like NFTs and things like that. um, like, why does it always have to be in a situation where it's a world where,
It's the
like,
end of the world, dystopian, and
yeah,
this, yeah, like you
yeah,
can't. No one
exactly.
wants to
Why?
go outside because the environment's ruined.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why can't it just be like I think this is where the issue lies, is that one of the big reason why it gives value and worth to the reasoning behind the metaverse is that a lot of what people see as to why I would want to go in there, it's because my reality is not as good as what it could be in the metaverse.
Hmm.
But ultimately, the metaverse will not be free. And if you look at how much it's costing right now, it almost feels like the metaverse, or at least the life that you could build yourself in the metaverse, could actually be more expensive than.
Exorbitantly more expensive.
Yeah, so I'm not understanding sort of the reasoning. Like, if it'd be cheap, like if I could have like a mansion and all those sorts of things like for like $25, then like with a theme plate on Team Forest or on Envato, then yeah, it makes sense. But that's not the case. You know, if you want to buy land now, it's like 60 grand. Well, I mean,
Like you could buy
like, but
beachfront property in Ecuador for $60,000. You know.
like, why aren't you buying a real land like for
Yeah.
60 grand? And then, oh, like, I'm going to build a house in the metaverse and that's going to cost me like those mansions that are being built for like for 2 million. Well, like, I'm not getting it. Like, I feel like it's another way of flashing things, and it's going to be reserved mostly for the rich and famous. And, you know, the average person that is actually, if you look at sort of the reasoning behind metaverse, like this idea that you could have a better life there, then like you're indirectly saying that the people that will be in there are your average class or even below, sort of, you know, people that have potentially that they're not happy with what they have or how
In
they
reality.
live or
Hmm.
their own reality. And based on this, well, where are they going to get the funds to actually build a better life in the metaverse unless they're going to be hobos in the metaverse? Like,
Streetwalkers in the metaverse.
like, what's like, how is
What's the
that better?
draw? What's the draw? Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, yeah, I think right now there's like, I'm not seeing. I still think this is something for the people that have money. And if you have money, you're not going to find more happiness there than, you know, in your real life. You know, happiness.
Well,
I'm going
I,
to be cliche, you know, but happiness starts from within.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a big agreeer of that. But I think that the tail sign of that is exactly who's doing this. Damac in Dubai. This is some of the most expensive, prestigious, premium real estate in the world. It's a very small group of people. I mean, who goes to Dubai and UAE? These are very rich people from the Middle East. Kids are driving 19 Ferraris. They have their own YouTube channel with 10 million followers, even though they don't need the money. It's that kind of crowd that they're shooting towards. And I think maybe that's also, me saying that, where you have, these 22-year-olds, 23-year-olds, maybe that's their audience, rich kids with so much money, they
Yeah.
really don't know what to do with it. And I like to see the idea, though, that you can still buy general real estate, the idea of use cases, where we start to get into a little bit of a gray area when it comes to speculative markets. And I think that, real estate, like I said, I've made my bread and butter there in the past. I still do that today. Even though I'm entirely focused on Embr, I still run my real estate business. And one of the things that I'm seeing here, and this is an article, it's for a new class of landlord. And because there is such a boom in real estate right now, is it a speculative bubble? Is this like the Big Short all over again? That's a discussion for another day. I personally think that real estate can't possibly sustain being this so expensive, but maybe it can because of things like this. So really, what it is, it's the startups as a way for people, because they're so expensive, to be able to buy a starter home or be able to invest in real estate. They've come up with this thing now through the blockchain that people will be able to buy stakes in a rental home for as little as $50. So let's say you and I don't know. I guess I don't know how many people for
So it's
$50 would take
fractionalized ownership, but
fractionalized ownership,
of
and
real
then
estate.
of real estate. Now the rental properties, though, so they can produce income. Now, if it's $50, imagine the amount of people it must take to buy some of these homes, and ever heard of the old the old saying, a camel is a horse designed by committee? You ever heard that before?
No, but I can see how, it's sort of a thing in disguise, pretty much.
Yeah, and also too the idea that when you have so many people putting their fingers into something to what your design aspects are, when you're trying to build a horse, you end up with a camel, like sort of like that Simpsons episode
Yeah.
with the Homer car that has every single feature, just looks ridiculous. And so the issue with this though is that in these properties, so let's say that there's an anecdote here about there was a replacement fan that needed to be happen. There was only $35, but because this house was owned by, I guess, thousands of people, and they all had to vote on any expenditures that happened to happen.
What a massive
So
headache.
to be able to replace a $35 fan, it was literally. I mean, this is actually not even just a hyperbole. It's literally takes an act of Congress to be able to approve a $35 fan. And this is on an asset that is supposed to be a non-volatile asset. I don't know if this is still propping up the market. Can we see a huge exodus out of this because of this? I don't know what your thoughts are on this. Well,
my thought is that I'm not interested. but I think it's the beginning of something. And if you look at fractionalize ownership on the blockchain through smart contracts and things like that, I think maybe what it needs is potentially to slap on some form of DAO mechanism, so that things under a certain threshold doesn't need to be voted on. And there's what you call like a person that is nominated to basically execute things that are below the certain threshold. So if it's like below 500, then it gets decided automatically by this person. It doesn't need to be voted on. But anything beyond that, then it's taken to the urns and to like basically to be voted on. But I think the concept is good, but then you need to bring in management principles around what it is. I mean, I would assume it's the same if you look at a property managed by a co-op, where every single tenant has a voice and something to say. If the roof needs to be redone or anything like that, then like people come in and they have to decide. But if it's like we need to change the light bulb in front, I don't think that people come in and decide, well, which light bulb is it going to be. I think it comes down to management principles. Yeah.
Well, I think this goes back again to the idea that maybe the crypto is a victim of its own success, because I mean, this is the most corporate speak I've ever seen. I love this tagline: "You can't afford to buy a home yourself, but maybe you can become 1/50th of a landlord." Sounds exciting. That's an actual.
Well, the way you put it, I mean, if I'd be looking at feedback on what it is, and I'd be seeing, well, last time we had to argue, to change the fan, I'd be like, oh, I'm not getting into that.
Well, also too, the big issue too is I don't think the tenants are aware of what the situation is once they move in.
That's interesting, though.
Of them coming in and being like, I have a landlord, and then they're like, nope, there's 50 of them.
Yeah, what's the actual like transparency behind that model? That's an interesting thing. Yeah, the sort of governing body. I mean, it's owned on the blockchain, but there's you need to build a bridge, between the blockchain and legal entities. So ultimately, like, how are they going to make that happen? The legal entity actually owns like the property, but who owns the legal entity? So it's like shares of that. So it becomes messy. I can see a lot of areas where beyond just like the day-to-day management, the way it's organized in the background could be complex.
Yeah, I'm sure. As we say here in Miami too, I'm sure they're doing a lot of legal ninjutsu to be able to make a lot of this stuff happen.
They're black belt for sure.
Yeah. And I think the big takeaway though is really about the idea that we're seeing mass adoption in generally areas that are generally really only adhere to traditional finance. And we're starting to see the larger and broader adoption of cryptocurrency in spaces like this, which again, as I say, regardless of maybe some of these are hits, some of them might be misses. I mean, they are speculative, but I think the idea of the mass adoption helps all projects, and especially ours as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, talk about it in good, talk about it in bad, but just talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. There's no such thing as bad publicity.
Exactly.
Speaking of adoption, on to our next subject. A lot of, I guess this is something that's also positive, is the mass adoption as its legal tender, their actual currency for their entire country in developing countries is expanding pretty fast. Earlier this year, or I think it was last year, maybe El Salvador announced that they were going to use Bitcoin as their currency. And now recently we have another country here to add to the list, which is the Central African Republic, which is probably one of the poorest nations out there in the world, and them adopting cryptocurrency, Bitcoin in particular, as being their national currency. And we're also seeing even countries like Cuba that are now opening access for people to use the blockchain to be able to spend with cryptocurrency as well. And we're seeing adoptions like this. I want to know what your thoughts are on that, Jason.
Well, I mean, I did look into it a little. I mean, I'm following the news, and from the experience of El Salvador, lots of things sort of came up when trying to actually, legalization and adoption is two different things, and
they had a myriad of problems while they were doing that.
Oh yeah, I mean the whole well, first of all, they had to launch a national wallet, for holding the currency, because when you make it legal tender, then you need to make sure it's accessible to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's on one fold. But then again, how do you also enable merchants to receive that? At the end of the day, now it becomes like this whole other beast of, well, if my normal currency is Bitcoin or whatever, and I get into a shop and I want to buy a pint of milk, and I don't have any like physical coins or anything like that, or paper tender, like how does the actual merchant or corner store will accept it, without a fault? And that's important, without a fault, without downtime, without too much excess fees. And we need to remember that the blockchain is not something, especially on layer one, it's not something that is instantaneous. It doesn't happen straight up. When you tap your card, it happens immediately. But so and then there was also like potential ATMs and things like that. So it became a real headache when it was all about execution and adoption. It's definitely an amazing sort of precedent and
milestone for
first use case.
Mm-hmm.
But this is why we feel that, these infrastructure, these layer ones, they're amazing, but now we need to figure out the application side of things, which is layer twos and everything that has to do with higher throughput, fast, roll ups, and all of these things. They're going to be figured out potentially this year and next year, and at which point then we'll have the speed, we'll have the application, whether it's a service or a product. And I think we will also have different types of currencies that will be tenders, in the sense that will be available to be used. And ultimately, will they need to be official or not? I think it goes back to an old principle that was really interesting, is that, when the first people started exploring the world, they explored and they had things that had values to them, and they were exchanging with people that they were,
Yeah, they didn't have the same economy. So I think
yeah,
there's a story about that. We bought like all of Manhattan Island from Indians for like beads or something.
whatever what it was. But I think ultimately currency, everybody knows that, it's worth whatever everyone says,
Perceived
or
value is, yeah.
yeah, exactly. So at the end of the day, I see a world where it's not going to be about legalization, of a certain tender or a certain currency in a state. It's really going to be about decentralized market and decentralized sort of currencies, and whatever the worth is of that currency and that other currency, the two can meet at an exchange rate with seamless process without any intermediary. And I think, we have thoughts on this subject, and we have a vision on this use case, with the underlying technology of checkout. But that's a subject for later. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Excellent. Yeah. And I have to say that I think another big aspect of this, and not to get too into geopolitical politics or, economy myself, being American myself, but that the powers that be, the Western powers that control, all of the banking and traditional finance, that countries, a lot of people can make this, can make the case that, countries in the developing nations a lot of times are victims of these larger banking and financial institutions that are really taking advantage of a lot of these countries for the last several decades.
Well, it's centralized and controlled.
Yes, absolutely.
I
and
mean,
I think
if and it's the same thing in the States. It doesn't need to be like, an emerging country or somewhere in Southeast Asia. I mean, if your currency does not have a fixed supply, then you can go both ways. If you increase the supply, then you reduce the value of the actual currency. And I think that right now what's happening is that I think most financial bodies are starting to realize that they've messed up the actual, let's say hypothetically, the USD for the case in point. They've messed it up so much in terms of the amount of debt, the amount of of new printing of money, that there's no real way out of it. And I think, there's this big, not conspiracy thing, but if you look online, you'll be able to find this consortium of different government bodies that want to agree on a centralized digital currency that basically will be able to be they'll be able to change what you can do with it. Meaning that, let's say hypothetically, if they change the USD with a digital currency that is centralized and sort of owned by the government, they could potentially say, well, this month you can't spend your money on burgers. Mm-hmm. You can only buy. And then once you go and try to use your digital currency, it will not work to buy certain things because they just have total control over the actual currency. But anyway, that's
a rabbit hole for another day.
Yeah, most definitely.
Still down the line though. But I think also too is that when it comes to when I think it was so surprising reading the idea when you're talking about centralization and control, a big I guess analysis of when China, every couple of months last year, for some reason, everyone was shocked what happened, saying they were going to ban cryptocurrency, and everyone's hair was on fire, even though they announced the same thing 3 months ago. I guess memories are short. And one of the biggest,
many years ago as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the analysis, though, from some people were like, well, why are they doing this? And because the Chinese Communist Party is all about control and centralized control. And that's why they don't like the idea of a decentralized currency. So I was shocked when I saw that something like Cuba, which is one of the few remaining countries on Earth that still follows that same communistic kind of ideology that China does. And for them kind of opening up to cryptocurrency is really surprising to me. And it shows a level of adoption. Now people, those same analysis are saying it's all about control when it comes to China. Now, when it comes to Cuba, of course, it's all about avoiding tariffs and avoiding, sanctions, and it's all about how cryptocurrency can be nefarious. I love how the media decides to change the narrative on a dime, depending on what country meets that narrative or not.
Yeah. Well, there's also like generational shifts as well. When you think about Cuba, the Castros, it's not the same era, and you also
People in Miami
have.
though are still pretty hot about it. Here in Miami, they still can't let it go.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I've been to Cuba, and the young generation is not necessarily in the same frame of mind as the previous, whether it was their parents or grandparents' ideologies, and they do have access to the rest of the world, even though their internet is piss poor, and pretty much you can't use it almost nowhere. But they're fully aware of what's happening in the world, and ultimately, I see this as not necessarily a nefarious sort of strategy. I see this as potentially, the new generations trying to be more on cue with what's happening around.
And as they should too. I mean, I think a big problem we have here in the United States is that the majority of the people in Congress and Senate are pretty much geriatric in their 70s, 80s, and almost past their 80 years old period. And I think it's about time to hand the mantle over. Speaking of handing the mantle over, I know that you and I really didn't want to talk too much about this subject because everyone has spoken about this subject ad nauseum. At this point,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we have any hot takes here that someone else hasn't already offered, depending on whatever podcast or media outlet. But for those that have been living under a rock,
A big rock.
a big rock, Elon Musk purchased Twitter. He said he was going to do it. He did it. Whether you think of Elon or not and what his motivation is to do so, he says free speech. I'm sure that, like I said, everyone's had a hot take on this and what that means for free speech, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we want to keep things that are close to Embr and what it means for us in our industry. And Jason, you mentioned this earlier. We were talking about this off air, is that he was talking about, there's a lot of discussion in the media too, as well, is that when it comes to, we're going to get rid of bots. What's going on with the world when it comes to bots? Is that considered free speech when a bot does it? And number two, a lot of people, when they talk about a lot of these meme tokens or poo coins, a big way they're able to reach a broad audience is through Twitter. They're able to communicate with one another. A lot of these things, some of them have utility, some of them don't. Some of them are just, pump and dump, so they know it. And, they're pushing it very hard on Twitter. And there's a lot of outcry to people saying is that isn't free speech, that they should, that's basically, even though there's no regulatory body that's supposed to be taking in charge of this, that somehow Elon should come in and save the day. I know there's a big talk because he's supposed to, a lot of people in cryptocurrency are very happy because that Elon's pro crypto, and Twitter has signaled that they wanted to be able to adopt crypto payments or some kind of crypto ecosystem involved into their business model. But I want to know what you think about that, Jason. I know that we want to spend too much time on it because everyone, their brothers already said their opinion by now, I'm sure.
Yeah, and you're right. I think the outlook of this acquisition, and making the company private is actually positive. Now, a lot of people will have their own opinion on why it won't be or why it will be, and we're not going to dive into that. But I think that for us in our space, Twitter is a great platform to, and it's the same for anything that is current events. Anything that's happening now. That's why Twitter is so interesting. And when it comes to getting the pulse on the market, whether it's stocks or crypto, Twitter is a great source of information to know what people are talking about. But unfortunately, when you have a business model, especially one that is revolving around
advertising.
Well, yes, but I was trying to refer more into sort of the growth or the monthly active users, and all those sorts of metrics to track growth or potential just like usage. It's not necessarily in your own interest to kill one third of your total monthly active users because they're all bots. How would that look like on your what's it called? When you have your earnings call, but not your
Earnings
earning.
call.
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
something like that.
but the thing is though is that by taking it private, that he's no longer held to the whims, and he's talked about this in the past, where the idea that the business model, and that's why Jack Dorsey famously left, because he says, I love the product, and I just hated this whole thing about Wall Street and having to meet these certain expectations all the time. Of, did you over did you meet expectations? Did you didn't meet expectations, and your stock will fluctuate, and try to work within those guidelines becomes extremely difficult. And their whole idea of monetizing is based on advertisers, so they're worried about do we want to piss off
VIs.
advertisers? Yes, exactly, and VIs, exactly. Yeah, the eyes that are on the project.
Yeah. So I think that and Elon has obviously commented on this many times, especially recently in his TED Talk. If you haven't seen it, it's very interesting. There's some elements in there that are very marketing, in my opinion, but he did mention that one of his focus will be to remove all these bots, and if someone can do it, it's definitely Elon. With the world class level of engineering that he has in the Tesla team that works on AI and things like that. I'm pretty sure that overnight he could get that fixed and out of the way, and that will have an effect not only on crypto, but a lot on bullying or things like
Political
potential.
discourse, conspiracy theory, fight
Yeah,
against truth,
just
that kind of stuff.
yeah, exactly. A lot of those things that have traction are not necessarily being the traction is not actually real. So and also like shadow banning and all those sorts of things. These are all like the cancel culture, and we're just gonna
Mm-hmm.
shut you down because we don't like what you're saying and things like that. So that's definitely not um, the whole idea of free speech. But I think it'll have a really really good impact on the crypto at large when they call it crypto Twitter or whatever. Yeah.
Do you think though that going into like the actual crypto space, let's say a token, it might be a meme token, it might not be, it might be a utility token. It's also very difficult to decipher which is which, and just like the same thing with free speech. Is that considered free speech? I mean, that's like the idea of free speech is that the people are going to say stuff that you disagree with, but you still give them a platform to do so. They'll be able to have, and basically Twitter's become, the town square of the 21st century. Um, the difference, though, is that in something like with cryptocurrency, or not, I guess not necessarily the difference is finance and money's involved. But where the differences stop there is because at the same time with any asset or digital asset, any token, who is the authority to say whether this is legitimate or not? Who is the person to do so without, with government regulation? I mean, that shouldn't be Elon or Twitter's job, should it?
Well, no, but it still remains that Twitter is, it's an influential, very influential, platform when it comes down to an influential medium, and every medium, whether it's a paper, if the front page of the New York Times says that something is something, then it has influence on it.
Mm-hmm. And legitimacy
So
at that point.
yeah, indirectly. I mean, I wouldn't say that Twitter has legitimacy,
But no, whatever the
but
story would be at that point, using your
unfortunately,
example.
the way people perceive legitimacy is often based on the loudness of the voice. In regards to so if a lot of people talk about it, it suddenly it's what it's called. The what influences people, or there's this thing where it's called, I think it's called the sheep factor, where everybody wants to be like everyone else, and if someone's doing something, then you're like, well, I want to do that something as well. So it's like the herd mentality,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I could say, but yeah, we'll see what comes out of it. I think that broader speaking, I was listening to a podcast yesterday, the Sway podcast, and they were going at length as to how he actually was able to come up with the cash. And I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see.
It was not all his
Be,
money, He
well, I
came with a
mean,
large portion of it, but he's the largest shareholder still, but he still had to have a lot of
well,
people help him out,
the issue is that he had to come up with about $21 billion worth of cash, and he leveraged basically all a good portion of his Tesla stock
Mm-hmm.
to come up with that. And so we'll see what that means. If the markets fall too much, then
You might get a margin call.
well, they might, what happens if they have to come for those stocks, and who's going
Mm-hmm.
to be the majority holder? And, it's, they
Is he
could
leaving? Is
have
he
a
leaving
trickling
investors
effect.
holding the bag? Yeah.
I don't know, but it'll definitely have a trickling effect. Hopefully everything will stay positive. But yeah.
Well, moving on, but before we do, there's one of my favorite quotes that I love always hearing is that when we were younger, we were promised flying cars, and instead we got 128 characters.
Oh yeah.
So also today,
The good old Jetsons.
I know,
Uh,
right? Now just kind of move forward. The topic's kind of over. We do have some questions I do want to take from the community. We are running out of time. Really quickly, though, we do want to give you guys a little bit of a project update. We've had a very exciting week moving that we just had previously when it comes to Embr Checkout. Next week, I think is going to be even better. You're going to see the inclusion and implementation of more projects every day throughout the week. We want to be able to grow this thing to at least 100 products being able to use it in a very short time. I think we're on track to meet that goal, especially some stuff that we have going on in the background. But checkout is really just the first step in a broader ecosystem, which is Embr. Jason, do you want to kind of give some insight on that? And a lot of people too, as well, they want to know how it's affecting the token and what do we have, when it comes to utilize to the utility and how the token's going to work through all of these parts of the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, you do hit sort of an important topic is, I mean, we're so focused on creating world class utility for this token and this business, so that we're not reliant on um, market behavior and things like that. But we are, obviously relentlessly working on creating synergies between product services and the Embr token. And I think that's always going to be part of what we do, because we truly believe in the decentralized ownership of our the way we see business in the future, and also capitalizing on this decentralized approach and everything that has to do with it. But I think what's also important to emphasize on is, checkout is just one sort of moving part of a broader, like you mentioned, ecosystem. And sometimes I like to use some narratives, or at least I try to paint the picture. And our vision for Embr Org and everything that we're doing with our product and service vision has to do with ideation to launch. And when you think about this, we started sort of dividing the journey in a few sort of different categories, or at least families of products that could potentially support these different stages. And we've mentioned, multiple times, this discovery, and the discovery of being able to find, the next gem or the next world changing crypto project. That's everything that comes, at the beginning. And then you have things that we could categorize as pre-launch, that you'll find in there, the products and services that will empower any token to do pre-sales. We've done it ourselves. We know it's battle tested, but how can we use? And we've promised it from the beginning. That we were going to sort of repurpose what we use, and we had
For our
tremendous
launch.
success. Yeah, exactly, for our launch. So all of these elements there, we're packaging them up to create a unique sort of set of tools that will enable any project on any chain to launch their ideas, or whatever they want to launch. And then after that, you have the launch itself. So how do you take your project into secondary market? There's a lot of issues as to how you can do it. We've faced a few of them, and we've conceptualized how we can mitigate for those and help others have a more controlled and seamless experience going from pre-sale to secondary market. And then once you're in secondary market, which we would qualify as post-launch, how do you empower those token powered business to operate? And checkout is part of post-launch. We've designed and built this embeddable widget that will come in multiple shapes. Right now, it's a widget, but you'll have a full page checkout. You'll have also a modal version of it, and everything that supports it in the background. So you'll have a dashboard.
Can we give a lot of people have been asking too as well, is that I know that's part of right now in the closed beta. I see a lot of questions here from the community too as well. I don't mean to interrupt you, Jay, because I know we're running a little low on time here. About the idea of when people can start to see what checkout will actually really look like as a finished product. Are they going to get a sneak peek of that beforehand? Do you have any kind of tidbits they can kind of let them know about what we're showing
Possibly. I mean, we're not going to show anything today because it's not
the platform for that right now, and
it's
not on our agenda.
Yeah, but the good news is that we're rapidly approaching our public beta. There's a few key elements that are missing and that we're building, and we're finalizing those last few TD bits. And it's coming in the next couple of weeks. It's not months, it's a couple of weeks. And from there, we'll be able to think about all these other, because the demand is pretty important on everything that has to do with pre-launch and launch. We've been talking about this for a long time, and we're quite focused, on what's next, because checkout is very stable. It's very much scalable, and we feel that once it's out, of the gate, we already need to start thinking about what's next. And everyone knows that the token, plays, somewhat of a.
Well, that was the next part. Is people are dying to know is how is this token going to integrate with utility? Because people really want to see the value of what the token will be in the future.
Well, the utility. I mean, through checkout, there's obviously the buyback. So that will play an important role into stabilizing and growing, the liquidity pool and the market around the token. But I feel that where the Embr token will have the most utility is in the ecosystem. And we've talked about this again, but I think it's worth reiterating, is we have great enthusiasm for how the Embr token will have utility in what we could call the discovery to pre-launch and launch phases of Embr.org. And this is where, I can't really dig too much into how this will materialize and become a reality, but it's a central part of everything that will happen.
Yeah, and any of the decision making that we're doing, that's obviously something that's on our mind. Number one is how do we take care of our investors?
But there's also, I mean, there's the reward part of it. Everybody's probably been staking, and the more we move forward, I mean, the more we will introduce,
Because
staking.
we have more features coming on that front as well.
Yeah, and there's also something that we've mentioned before, which is, making the Ember token at some level be part of the governance of everything that has to do with the give back. So if people want to get involved in decision making and go beyond just being a holder or using the Ember token as a form of utility in the ecosystem from discovery to pre-launch, and to launch, then there's that also that is available to you. So I feel we're addressing all the areas where people could or would want the token to have utility, meaning, and potential.
Mm-hmm.
We will probably do a full episode in the next couple of weeks around once we reveal some of these elements. And but I'm truly excited, about where we're taking this, and it's gonna be like truly. I mean, most of
Next
these,
level.
yeah, well, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily next level, but
Well, when it comes to ease of use and accessibility for some of the things that we're going to be offering, I think it's the next level in that department because of the hurdle of difficulty of the learning curve to be able to get to that point is so difficult now that what we're going to be offering is really going to be next level when it comes to introducing new people to this space.
yeah, no, I mean we're 100% focused on making the space more accessible. So we need to make it fun at some point. So
Mm-hmm.
there's some elements of how can we make the Ember token fun in terms of utility. So you can connect the dots when I'm saying this, what it could
Mm-hmm.
potentially mean. But there's a lot of thought being put into um, giving utility to the Ember token.
Excellent.
So yeah.
Excellent. And just to wrap this up real quick, that kind of answers some of the questions that I'm seeing here.
Yep.
One of the ones I like to address, though, that both of us two kind of put our 2 cents in. A couple of people asking is, how satisfied are you guys regarding the checkout beta? How's it been going? And have you guys had seen any suggestions or objections when it comes to projects that are already using checkout? And for those of us, you and I, that are kind of on the front lines of that, talking to people, I would say that we're very satisfied with how satisfied projects are. Once the relationship that we're able to build with a project once, because I don't want to get too much of what our process is and who's when they're closed beta, but when a project does implement, the relationship and bond that we build with them instantaneously, because they are so excited to refer us, to talk about building partnerships, to want to be more involved in what we're doing, and letting us know, like, oh, these are the people we also know that are running the actual blockchain of the DEX itself. We can make these introductions. It's such a great thing. And we've seen this happen with Wire. We've seen this happen with Hacking and the stuff that we're doing. I'm overly satisfied. Jason, I just want to know if you want to put your 2 cents in there as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we look at more of a sort of metrics driven analysis, yeah, we're over the moon in regards to how well things are going, how um, when people start interacting with the actual widget, how many
And also
transactions
stability.
convert. Yeah, all
Stability.
these things that we need to look into, because we feel that UX UI is an important thing, and we're working extremely hard on releasing a new look and feel based on feedback and comments. The experience of buying a token is never going to be the same once we enter production, and when we start presenting this new flow based on comments and feedback, and especially with Wire with the on ramp, which this is something that is coming in the next couple of weeks as well. Apologies. And I feel that, like you're mentioning, yes, there's the partner level, but the projects themselves, once they start seeing
The
how
level of
well.
enthusiasm. The
Yeah,
level of
but
enthusiasm
yeah,
from them. I mean,
from
what's the music?
from their community. I think this is where it matters the most, and this is where we want to have the most or the biggest impact. We want people to enjoy the process of buying a token, which, I mean, between you and I, Rob, and I'm pretty sure that the community out there listening to us, I can't say that, I've particularly loved buying, a token on a DEX. It's not like something I get out of and I say, wow, that was fun, but a lot of people have been commenting on and sharing their thoughts and feedback around buying a token using Embr checkout on one of these projects. And especially when you think about emerging chains, where the experience is way below, expectations. This is where I feel we have the biggest impact. And, we want to spread this impact to all the 20 plus different chains that we're compatible with, and empower and make buying, their assets much easier, much faster, and much more enjoyable. Ultimately, that's the end goal.
That's exactly what I was going to say too, is that the idea of making it very accessible to get, people's feet in the door, virtually obviously, but to get their feet in the door. And then once they're here, to make the process and the stuff that you're doing so enjoyable, it's a reason to stay. There's, customer retention, whether that's someone on, B2B or B2C, one of the best way to do is to make it enjoyable and make it fun, especially in a space that's, I think sometimes is lacking a bit of that.
Yeah, it's definitely missing. But that's fine. That's why we're here.
Gives us a niche. Well, listen, Jason, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I love these talks that we have on these weeks. It's been really great to see you again. For all of you that are listening online, or you can always catch us at any place you can catch any of your podcasts, and you can catch us live as well. That's 2 p.m. Easterns on Thursdays, normally. And we hope to catch you guys next time. Jason, it's been a real pleasure. See you later, buddy.
Thanks, everyone. See you guys next week.
Take it easy, guys.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Today at Embr. If you like the show, please rate and review. You can find us on all of the major podcasting platforms. You can also tune in to our live stream on YouTube and subscribe to our channel. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.